When Talia Monroe walked into Marrow & King as the new assistant to CEO Dorian King, everyone warned her she wouldn't last a week. He'd already fired 12 secretaries that year. But Talia had faced workplace discrimination before and refused to be intimidated by any man, no matter how powerful or cold he seemed. What started as a battle of wills between a demanding billionaire and a woman who wouldn't back down slowly transformed into something neither expected. This is a story about finding strength in the face of intimidation, love in the most unlikely places, and the courage to demand the respect you deserve. Before we start this story, comment below from where you are watching us. The morning sun poured through the tall glass windows of Talia Monroe's small apartment. At 28, she'd already learned more about workplace politics than most people learn in a lifetime. Standing in front of her mirror, she straightened her navy blue blazer and took a deep breath. Today is just another day, she told herself, though she knew it wasn't true. Today was her first day at Marrow & King, a company with a reputation that made even the bravest job seekers think twice. Talia picked up the newspaper clipping she'd saved. The headline read, "Marrow & King CEO fires 12th secretary this year." Below it was a photo of Dorian King, tall, imposing, with dark hair and cold eyes that seemed to look right through you. Her phone rang. It was her mother. "Baby, are you sure about this job?" her mother asked, concern filling her voice. "I heard that man is terrible to work for." "Mom, I need this job," Talia replied, gathering her purse. "After what happened at Westfield, I can't be picky." The memory of Westfield still stung. So after 3 years of hard work, she'd been passed over for promotion in favor of her less qualified white colleague. When she'd questioned the decision, her boss had called her difficult and not a team player. 2 weeks later, she was let go. "Just promise me you'll be careful," her mother said. "And remember what your father always said, never dim your light for anyone," Talia finished. "I know, Mom. I won't." The Marrow & King building stood like a glass giant against the sky, 52 floors of power and money. Talia walked through the revolving doors, her head held high despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. At the reception desk, a young woman with tired eyes looked up. "You must be the new temp," she said, her voice low. "12th floor. Patricia in HR is waiting for you." The elevator ride was quick, but it gave Talia time to steady herself. When the doors opened, a woman in her 50s with short grey hair approached. "Talia Monroe?" she asked, extending her hand. "I'm Patricia from Human Resources. Come with me." As they walked down the hallway, Patricia leaned in. "Listen, I feel I should warn you. Mr. King is difficult. He fired the last secretary because she wore too much perfume. The one before that because she laughed while typing." Talia nodded. "I read about his reputation." Patricia stopped at her office door. "No one lasts a month, don't unpack." Talia straightened her shoulders. "I don't unpack for men, I clock in." Patricia's eyebrows rose, then she smiled. "I like you, but I've liked the others too. Let's see if you're still here next week." After completing the paperwork, Talia was led to a desk outside a large corner office. The nameplate on the door read, "Dorian King, CEO." "He's in a meeting," Patricia explained. "He'll be back in an hour. Get familiar with the computer system. Your login information is in the drawer." Left alone, Talia organized her workspace with efficient precision. She reviewed files, memorized phone extensions, and learned the scheduling system. By the time the elevator doors opened an hour later, she was ready. The man who stepped out was taller in person than in his photos. Dorian King moved with the confidence of someone who owned not just the building, but the very air inside it. His suit was perfectly tailored, his expression severe. He walked straight to his office without acknowledging Talia, but stopped when he realized the door was locked. Turning slowly, he fixed his cold gaze on her. "You must be the new one," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "Talia Monroe," she replied, standing up and extending her hand. He looked at her hand but didn't take it. "The key to my office?" Talia didn't lower her hand. "I'd like to introduce myself properly first, Mr. King." For a moment, the hallway was silent. Then, surprising them both, he took her hand. "Dorian King, now the key." Talia reached into her desk drawer and handed him the key. "Your conference call with Tokyo is in 20 minutes. I've prepared the files you'll need. They're on your desk." He raised an eyebrow. "Who told you about the Tokyo call?" "No one. I checked your calendar and took the initiative." Without another word, he unlocked his door and disappeared inside. Talia sat back down, her heart pounding. She'd stood her ground, but she wondered if she'd just talked herself out of a job before lunchtime. The morning passed in a blur of phone calls and emails. Dorian emerged from his office only once, to hand her a stack of papers that needed to be copied and distributed before his next meeting. 20 copies, collated and stapled, he said without looking at her, and I need them in 10 minutes. The copy room was at the other end of the floor. Anyone else would have panicked or complained. Talia simply nodded and got to work. 8 minutes later, she placed 20 perfectly collated and stapled packets on his desk. He looked up from his computer, clearly surprised. "Is there anything else you need, Mr. King?" she asked. He studied her for a moment. "Coffee. Black." Talia returned to her desk and picked up the phone. 5 minutes later, a young man from the cafeteria arrived with a steaming cup of coffee. She brought it into Dorian's office and placed it on his desk. He looked at the coffee, then at her. "I didn't say to order it. I meant for you to make it." The job description said administrative assistant, not barista, Talia replied evenly. "The cafeteria makes excellent coffee. I thought you'd appreciate efficiency." She expected him to explode, to fire her on the spot. Instead, he picked up the cup and took a sip. "It's cold," he said. Talia took the cup from his hand, her fingers brushing his. "I'll get you another one." When she returned with a fresh cup, he was on the phone, his back to the door. She placed the coffee on his desk and turned to leave. "Stay," he said, covering the mouthpiece of the phone. "I need you to take notes." For the next hour, Talia sat across from Dorian, recording the details of his call with a potential client. She was impressed despite herself. Behind his cold exterior was a brilliant mind, quick and strategic. When the call ended, he handed her a notebook. "Type these up and email them to me before you leave today." By 6 o'clock, most of the office had emptied out. Talia had just sent the email with the notes when Dorian emerged from his office, coat in hand. "You're still here," he observed. "You said you needed the notes today." He nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Tomorrow, be here at 7. "The office opens at 8, Talia pointed out. "My office opens when I arrive. 7 o'clock. After he left, Talia allowed herself a small smile. She hadn't been fired. In Dorian King's world, that was practically a gold star. The next morning, Talia arrived at 6:50. To her surprise, Dorian was already there, standing by her desk with an irritated expression. "You're late," he said. Talia checked her watch. "It's not 7 yet. If you're not early, you're late." She set down her purse and looked him directly in the eyes. "Then tomorrow, I'll be here at 6:30. "Make it 6, he replied, turning to enter his office. The power play continued for days. Each morning Talia would arrive earlier than requested, and each morning Dorian would already be there, acting as if she was late. By Friday, she was arriving at 5 a.m. When she walked in that morning, the office was dark. For once, she had beaten him to work. She switched on the lights and prepared for the day, enjoying the quiet victory. At 5:30, the elevator dinged. Dorian walked in, stopping short when he saw her already at her desk. "Good morning, Mr. King," she said. "Your coffee is on your desk. Hot, black, and made by the cafeteria staff who came in early as a special favor to me." For the first time, she saw a flicker of something other than coldness in his eyes. Not quite a smile, but perhaps the ghost of one. "Your 10 o'clock meeting with the board has been moved to 11, she continued. "I've adjusted your schedule accordingly." He nodded and went into his office without comment. But he didn't close the door all the way, which Talia took as a good sign. By the end of her second week, Talia had established a rhythm. She anticipated Dorian's needs before he voiced them, fielded calls with diplomatic precision, and managed his schedule with an efficiency that even he couldn't criticize. On Friday afternoon, Dorian's brother Michael came to the office. Unlike Dorian, Michael was all charm and easy smiles. He winked at Talia as he breezed past her desk. "So you're the new secretary everyone's talking about," he said. "The one my brother hasn't fired yet." "Administrative assistant," Talia corrected. "And yes, I'm still here." Michael laughed. "Impressive. What's your secret?" Before Talia could answer, Dorian opened his office door. "Stop bothering my staff, Michael." The brothers disappeared into the office, but their voices carried. They were arguing about the company's direction, with Michael pushing for riskier investments and Dorian holding firm. An hour later, Michael stormed out, nodding curtly to Talia as he passed. Dorian followed, his face like thunder. "My 10 a.m. on Monday," he said to Talia. "Who is it?" "Harrison from legal," she replied. "About the Westbrook contract. Cancel it, and get me Phillips on the phone." Talia picked up the phone. "He's in London. It's almost midnight there." "I don't care if he's on the moon. Get him on the phone." 10 minutes later, Talia transferred the call to Dorian's office. She could hear the sharp edge in his voice as he spoke, the controlled anger. When he finally emerged, it was past 7. Talia was still at her desk, finishing a report. "You can go home," he said, noticing her. "I'll just finish this." He stood there for a moment, watching her. "My brother thinks I should fire you." Talia looked up, surprised. "Why?" "He says you're too independent, that an assistant should be more deferential." "And what do you think?" Dorian considered this. "I think independence is rare and valuable." It wasn't exactly a compliment, but coming from him, it felt like one. The following Monday, Talia arrived to find a small box on her desk. Inside was a silver pen with her initials engraved on it. There was no note, no explanation. When Dorian arrived, she held up the pen. "Thank you for this." He shrugged. "Your old one was leaking ink. It was inefficient." It was the closest thing to kindness she'd seen from him. That morning, during a staff meeting, Talia got her first real glimpse of why Dorian King was feared by more than just his assistants. He systematically dismantled a marketing proposal, pointing out every flaw with cold precision. "This is amateur work," he told the marketing director. "I expect better, or I'll find someone who can deliver better." The room was silent when the meeting ended. As the team filed out, Talia noticed the dejected look on the face of a young man who had worked on the proposal. Later, when she brought some files into Dorian's office, she decided to speak up. "That marketing team worked all weekend on that proposal," she said. Dorian didn't look up from his computer. "And they produced subpar work. Maybe they need guidance, not threats." Now he did look up, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" Talia stood her ground. "You hire smart people, then terrify them into mediocrity. Fear might get compliance, but it doesn't inspire excellence." She expected to be fired on the spot. Instead, Dorian leaned back in his chair, studying her. "And what would you suggest, Ms. Monroe?" "Tell them specifically what was wrong with the proposal. Give them a chance to fix it. Show them what excellence looks like instead of just demanding it." For a long moment, he said nothing. "Then, send Johnson in here, the young one who presented the data." Later that day, Talia saw Johnson leaving Dorian's office. Instead of looking defeated, he seemed energized. "He's giving us another shot," Johnson told her, his voice filled with disbelief. "He actually explained what he wants instead of just tearing us apart." By the end of her first month, Talia had done what no other assistant had managed. She had survived. The office had taken notice. Some people were friendly, impressed by her resilience. Others were suspicious, wondering what made her different. One afternoon, Dorian's 10 o'clock appointment arrived. A sleek, elegant woman named Vivian Reed, the CEO of a rival company. "Dorian will see you now," Talia said after announcing her arrival. Vivian smiled coolly. "So you're the famous Talia. Dorian mentioned you during our last dinner." The comment was clearly meant to establish territory, to remind Talia of her place. But Talia just smiled back, unfazed. "Mr. King speaks highly of you as well, Ms. Reed. He says your company's acquisition strategy is ambitious." It was a small reminder that Talia wasn't just a secretary taking messages. She was Dorian King's right hand, privy to his thoughts on business matters. The meeting ran long, and when Vivian finally emerged, her perfect composure seemed slightly ruffled. Dorian followed her out, his expression unreadable. "Your 10 a.m. is online too," Talia informed him after Vivian had left. "Tell them I'm unavailable." "Already did. Told them it was because you were in a mood." Dorian turned to her, eyes wide. "You what?" They laughed, said they understood. He glared. She smiled. And for the first time since she'd started working at Marrow & King, Dorian King almost smiled back. That evening, as Talia was preparing to leave, Dorian emerged from his office. Instead of his usual brusque nod, he stopped at her desk. "You've been here a month," he said. Talia nodded. "I have. Longer than any of the others." "So I've been told." He seemed to be considering something. "There's a company dinner tomorrow night. The board and key clients will be there. I need you to attend." It wasn't a request, but it wasn't delivered like his usual commands either. "What time?" Talia asked. 7. The Bristol Hotel. I'll send a car." As he walked away, Talia felt a strange flutter in her chest. It wasn't attraction. She wouldn't allow herself to be attracted to someone like Dorian King. It was something else. Pride, perhaps, or the thrill of a challenge accepted and met. She had survived a month at Marrow & King, but as she gathered her things to leave, she couldn't help but wonder what new tests tomorrow would bring. Talia stood in front of her closet, trying to decide what to wear to the company dinner. Her phone rang. It was her best friend, Jasmine. "So you're still working for the monster of Wall Street," Jasmine said with a laugh. "I owe you $20. I was sure you'd quit by now." "He's not that bad," Talia replied, surprising herself with the defense. "He's demanding, but he's also brilliant. Uh-oh, please tell me you're not falling for him. Talia rolled her eyes. Don't be ridiculous. I respect his business sense, that's all. Right. So what's this dinner about? It's a company thing. The board will be there, important clients. I'm just going to take notes and make sure everything runs smoothly. After trying on 3 different outfits, Talia settled on a simple black dress, professional but elegant. She was ready when the car arrived at her apartment building at 6:30. The Bristol Hotel was one of the city's oldest and most prestigious venues. As the driver opened her door, Talia felt a flutter of nerves. This wasn't just a work event. It was a step into Dorian's world. Inside, the ballroom was already filled with men in expensive suits and women dripping with jewelry. Talia recognized some of the faces from photos in financial magazines. Ms. Monroe. She turned to find Dorian standing behind her. He was dressed in a tuxedo that made his usual business suits look casual. For a moment she was struck by how handsome he was when he wasn't scowling. "Mr. King," she replied with a nod. "The room looks lovely." "It's adequate," he said, but there was less bite in his tone than usual. "Come, there are people you should meet." To Talia's surprise, Dorian introduced her not as his assistant, but as his colleague. The board members treated her with a deference she hadn't expected, and she realized that surviving a month with Dorian King had earned her a certain respect. "So, you're the miracle worker," said an older man with silver hair. "I'm Walter Marrow, the original Marrow." Talia shook his hand. "It's an honor to meet you, sir. Dorian tells me you've been a valuable addition to the team," Walter said, his eyes twinkling. He doesn't give compliments easily. Before Talia could respond, she noticed Vivian Reed entering the ballroom. The woman was stunning in a red dress that seemed designed to draw every eye in the room. "Your admirer is here," Talia said quietly to Dorian. He followed her gaze and frowned. "She's not my admirer. She's a competitor who wants to buy out our Asian division. And have dinner with you, apparently," Talia added, as Vivian made her way toward them. "Dorian," Vivian purred, air kissing his cheek. "You look handsome as ever." She barely glanced at Talia. "Oh, you brought your assistant. How unconventional." "Talia is here at my request," Dorian replied coolly. "She knows more about our current projects than most of the board." It was the closest thing to a public compliment Talia had ever received from him. She tried not to show her surprise. Dinner was served at round tables of 10. Talia found herself seated between Walter Marrow and Michael King, with Dorian directly across from her. As the meal progressed, she noticed Michael watching her with curious eyes. "So, Talia," he said during the main course, "what's your secret? How have you managed to last this long with my brother?" "There's no secret," she replied. "I do my job well." Michael laughed. "And come on, he must like you. Dorian doesn't keep people around unless they're useful to him." He lowered his voice. "Or unless he has other interests." Talia felt her cheeks grow warm. "Mr. King is my boss. That's all." "Michael," Dorian cut in, his voice sharp. "That's enough." The tension at the table was broken by Walter Marrow, who began telling a story about the early days of the company. Talia was grateful for the distraction, but she could feel Dorian's eyes on her for the rest of the meal. After dinner, there was dancing. Talia stood at the edge of the room, watching as board members and their spouses took to the floor. Vivian Reed had managed to get Dorian to dance with her, and they made a striking couple. Both tall, both powerful, both used to getting what they wanted. Not dancing. It was Walter Marrow coming to stand beside her. "I'm working," Talia replied with a smile. Walter chuckled. "Even Dorian isn't working at the moment." He nodded toward the dance floor, though he doesn't look like he's enjoying himself much. Indeed, Dorian's face was a mask of polite disinterest as Vivian talked animatedly, her hand on his arm. "May I give you some advice, my dear?" Walter asked. "I've known Dorian since he was a boy. His father, my former partner, was a hard man, cold. He taught Dorian that showing emotion was weakness, that caring about people was a distraction from success." Talia nodded, thinking of Dorian's icy demeanor. "But you," Walter continued, "you've gotten further past those walls than anyone I've seen. That's no small thing." Before Talia could respond, Dorian appeared beside them. "Walter," he nodded to the older man, "I need to borrow Ms. Monroe." Walter smiled knowingly. "Of course, of course." To Talia's surprise, Dorian led her to the dance floor. "I don't remember dancing being in my job description," she said, trying to hide her nervousness as he placed his hand on her waist. "Consider it overtime," he replied, the ghost of a smile on his lips. They moved across the floor with unexpected ease. Dorian was a good dancer, confident but not showy. Talia felt the eyes of others on them, particularly Vivian Reed, whose perfect smile had tightened into something less friendly. "People are watching," Talia said quietly. "Let them," Dorian replied. For a few minutes they danced in silence. Then Dorian spoke, his voice lower than usual. "What did Walter say to you?" Talia hesitated. "He was telling me about the early days of the company, and about my father, I imagine," Dorian added, his jaw tightening. "He mentioned him briefly." The song ended, and Dorian stepped back. The moment, whatever it had been, was over. "I have some calls to make," he said, his professional mask back in place. "Feel free to leave whenever you like. The car will take you home." He walked away, leaving Talia standing alone on the dance floor. The next morning, Talia arrived at the office to find a stack of files on her desk with a note. "Review these before the 9 a.m. meeting. DK." She was deep in the files when Dorian arrived. He nodded to her, but went straight into his office, closing the door firmly behind him. The 9 a.m. meeting was with the marketing team, including Johnson, the young man Dorian had given a second chance. Their new proposal was much stronger, and Dorian seemed satisfied, or as close to satisfied as he ever got. "Send the revised numbers to Westbrook," he told Talia as they walked back to his office, "and get me Phillips on the phone." The day continued in its usual rhythm. By afternoon, Talia had almost convinced herself that the dance, the moment of connection, had been a product of her imagination. Then, at 5 o'clock, Dorian emerged from his office with his coat. "I'm leaving early," he said. "You can go too." Talia looked up, surprised. "But the quarterly reports can wait until tomorrow." As he turned to leave, he paused. "Thank you for last night. You represented the company well." It was such a small thing, just a simple thank you. But from Dorian King it felt monumental. The next few weeks brought a subtle shift in their working relationship. Dorian was still demanding, still exacting, but there was less coldness in his manner. He began asking for Talia's opinion on minor matters, the wording of an email, the approach to a difficult client. One evening, as they were working late on a presentation, Dorian ordered dinner for them both. They ate at the conference table, surrounded by spreadsheets and market analyses. "How did you end up here?" Dorian asked suddenly. "At Marrow and King." Talia was surprised by the personal question. "I needed a job. You needed an assistant. There are easier jobs, less demanding bosses." She smiled. "I don't do easy, I do worthwhile." He studied her for a moment. "What happened at your last position?" "Westfield, wasn't it?" Talia tensed. She hadn't mentioned Westfield to him. "You checked my references," she realized. "I check everything," he replied. "You were there for 3 years, then suddenly left. Why?" Talia considered deflecting, but something told her to be honest. "I was passed over for a promotion I had earned. When I questioned it, I was labeled difficult. 2 weeks later, I was let go. And the person who got the promotion had been there half as long as me, had less experience, had the right connections, and the right skin color." Dorian's eyes narrowed. "They fired you for questioning discrimination?" "They fired me for not accepting my place," Talia corrected, "for thinking my work should speak for itself." "Their loss," Dorian said simply. "Our gain." It was the closest thing to warmth she'd ever heard in his voice. The following Monday, Talia arrived to find Dorian already in a meeting with Michael and 2 board members. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see that it was heated. Michael was gesturing emphatically, his face flushed, while Dorian remained stone-faced. When they finally emerged, Michael stormed past Talia's desk without acknowledgement. The board members followed, looking uncomfortable. Dorian stood in the doorway of the conference room, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Everything okay?" Talia asked. "My brother thinks we should sell the Asian division to Vivian Reed's company," Dorian replied, his voice tight. "He's convinced half the board it's the right move. And you disagree? The Asian markets are just beginning to open up. Selling now would be short-sighted." Talia nodded. "So what's your plan?" For the first time that day, Dorian's expression softened slightly. "That's what I appreciate about you, Talia. You don't ask if I have a plan, you ask what it is." He walked into his office, motioning for her to follow. For the next hour, he outlined his strategy for countering Michael's proposal. Talia took notes, offering suggestions when she saw gaps in the plan. As the days passed, the tension between the King brothers grew. Michael stopped by the office frequently, always with a new argument for why the Asian division should be sold. Each time he left more frustrated than before. One afternoon, after a particularly heated exchange, Talia overheard Michael on his phone in the hallway. "He's not budging," Michael was saying. But we only need one more vote on the board. Yes, I know what you promised. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Talia frowned. The conversation didn't sound like normal business discussion. It sounded like Michael was conspiring with someone. When Dorian returned from lunch, Talia told him what she'd heard. You think my brother is working with Vivian Reed, he said, his expression dark. I don't know for sure, Talia replied, but it sounded suspicious. Dorian was quiet for a moment. Thank you for telling me. I'll handle it. That night, Talia stayed late, finishing some reports Dorian needed for the next day. The office was quiet, most of the staff having gone home hours before. She was just about to leave when she heard voices from Dorian's office. The door was slightly ajar, and she could see Dorian sitting at his desk facing Walter Marrow. You need to be careful, Dorian, Walter was saying. Michael has been meeting with Vivian privately. I think they're planning something. I know, Dorian replied. Talia overheard him on the phone. Walter nodded. Smart girl, you should keep her close. I intend to. Talia backed away quietly, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. But as she turned, she bumped into a filing cabinet, making a loud noise. Who's there? Dorian called out. Talia stepped into view. Sorry, I was just finishing up some work. Walter smiled warmly. Ah, the woman of the hour. We were just talking about you. I heard, Talia admitted. I wasn't trying to listen in. Dorian looked at her for a long moment. Since you're here, you might as well join us. We're discussing the situation with Michael and Vivian Reed. For the next hour, the three of them strategized. Walter had connections with several board members who were on the fence about the sale. With the right approach, they might be swayed. The vote is in 2 weeks, Dorian said. We need to be prepared for anything. As the meeting wrapped up, Walter placed a hand on Dorian's shoulder. Your father would be proud of how you're handling this. Dorian's face hardened. My father would have fired Michael on the spot and threatened the board into submission. Perhaps, Walter conceded. But your way is better. After Walter left, Talia and Dorian remained in his office. The city lights glowed outside the windows, casting long shadows across the room. It's late, Dorian said. You should go home. But neither of them moved. Can I ask you something? Talia said finally. Dorian nodded. Why did you hire me? With my history at Westfield, I'm sure there were safer choices. I hired you because of your history at Westfield, he replied. Anyone who stands up for themselves the way you did isn't afraid of hard work or difficult people. He paused. And I can be a difficult person, Talia smiled. You don't say. To her surprise, Dorian laughed. A genuine laugh that transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. You're the only person who speaks to me that way, he said. Everyone else either fears me or wants something from me. Maybe they just need to get to know you better. Dorian's expression grew serious. I don't let people get to know me better. It's safer that way. Safer for whom? He didn't answer. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, calls, and strategy sessions. Dorian and Talia worked late every night, preparing for the board vote. Sometimes Walter joined them, bringing his years of experience and connections to the table. Michael appeared at the office less frequently, but when he did, his confidence was palpable. He seemed certain the vote would go his way. The night before the board meeting, Talia was organizing the final presentation when Dorian came to her desk. I need you to attend the meeting tomorrow, he said. Talia looked up, surprised. The board meeting, but I'm not... You know this situation better than anyone, Dorian interrupted. I want you there. The following morning, Talia dressed with extra care. She chose a sharp grey suit that made her feel confident, professional. When she arrived at the office, Dorian was waiting. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. The boardroom was on the top floor of the building, with sweeping views of the city. When Talia entered with Dorian, she felt the weight of every gaze. Michael was already there, seated near the head of the table. He raised an eyebrow at Talia's presence, but said nothing. As the meeting began, Walter Marrow took his place at the head of the table. As the company's founder, he still held the position of chairman. We're here to vote on the proposed sale of our Asian division to Reed Enterprises, Walter announced. Michael King will present the case for the sale, followed by Dorian King presenting the case against. Michael's presentation was smooth, persuasive. He outlined the immediate financial benefits of the sale, the risks of the volatile Asian markets, the opportunity to focus on more stable European expansion. When it was Dorian's turn, Talia expected a cold, logical counter-argument. Instead, he began with a story. My father and Walter built this company from nothing, he said, his voice steady. They took risks when others played it safe. They looked to the future when others were focused on immediate gains. He paused, making eye contact with each board member. The Asian markets aren't just an opportunity for profit. They're an opportunity to grow, to evolve, to become the company my father and Walter always envisioned. As he continued, Talia saw the board members' expressions change. Dorian wasn't just presenting facts and figures, he was sharing a vision, and it was compelling. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Walter spoke. "Before we vote, is there anything else either side would like to add?" Michael shook his head, looking less confident than before. Dorian turned to Talia. "Ms. Monroe has been instrumental in preparing our analysis. She has some additional information I think the board should hear." All eyes turned to Talia. She hadn't expected to speak, but she was ready. She stood, her voice clear and steady as she presented evidence that Reed Enterprises had been systematically undervaluing Asian technology firms before acquiring them. The sale would likely lead to the dismantling of the division and the loss of hundreds of jobs. As she concluded, she noticed Michael's face had gone pale. This was information he hadn't anticipated. The vote was taken by secret ballot. As Walter counted, the room was silent. Finally, he looked up. "The board has voted against the sale," he announced. "The Asian division will remain part of Marrow and King." The relief on Dorian's face was subtle but unmistakable. Michael, on the other hand, looked furious. He stood abruptly and left the room without a word. As the board members filed out, many stopped to congratulate Dorian and, to her surprise, Talia as well. "That was quite a presentation, young lady," one elderly board member told her. "You've got a future in this business." When they were finally alone, Dorian turned to Talia. "Thank you," he said simply. "I was just doing my job." "No," he shook his head. "You went beyond your job. You've always gone beyond." There was something in his eyes, a warmth, an appreciation, that made Talia's heart beat a little faster. The moment was interrupted by Walter, who returned to the boardroom with a bottle of champagne. "I think this calls for a celebration," he said, his eyes twinkling. As they shared a toast, Talia couldn't help but feel that something fundamental had changed. She was no longer just Dorian King's assistant. She had become something more, a trusted advisor, perhaps even a friend. Later that evening, as Talia was preparing to leave, Dorian appeared at her desk. "Have dinner with me," he said. It wasn't a command like his usual requests. It was softer, almost uncertain. Talia hesitated. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because you're my boss." Dorian nodded slowly. "And if I wasn't your boss?" The question hung in the air between them, full of possibilities and complications. "But you are," Talia said finally. "For now," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "But things change, Talia. People change." And looking at him, at the man who had begun as the cold, demanding boss she'd been warned about, and who had become something much more complex, Talia couldn't help but agree. Talia couldn't sleep that night. Dorian's words kept echoing in her mind. Things change, Talia. People change. She had turned down his dinner invitation, telling herself it was the professional thing to do. But as she stared at her ceiling, she wondered if she had made the right choice. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "How's life with Mr. Impossible?" Talia hesitated before replying, "Complicated." The next morning, the office was buzzing with news of the board's decision. Most employees seemed relieved that the Asian division wouldn't be sold, but there was also tension. Michael King's supporters were noticeably quiet, keeping to themselves in hushed conversations. When Talia arrived at her desk, she found a small white box waiting for her. Inside was a silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny desk. There was no note, but she knew who it was from. Dorian arrived an hour later, his face giving nothing away. "Good morning, Mr. King," Talia said, her voice professionally neutral. "Ms. Monroe," he nodded. "I need the Phillips file before my 10 o'clock. And just like that, they were back to business as usual, or so it seemed. But throughout the day, Talia caught Dorian watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. And once, when their hands brushed as she handed him a report, neither of them pulled away immediately. That afternoon, Michael King stormed into the office. His face was flushed with anger as he marched past Talia and straight into Dorian's office without knocking. "You think you've won," Michael's voice carried through the door, "but this isn't over." "It was a board decision, Michael," Dorian replied calmly. "Democracy at work." "Democracy?" Michael laughed bitterly. "You manipulated them, you and your assistant." There was a pause, then Dorian's voice, dangerously quiet. "Leave Talia out of this." "Why, because you're sleeping with her?" Talia froze at her desk, her heart pounding. "Get out of my office," Dorian said, his voice like ice. "Now." The door flew open, and Michael stormed out. He stopped at Talia's desk, leaning down until his face was inches from hers. "Enjoy it while it lasts," he said, his voice low. "He'll tire of you, just like he tires of everyone." Before Talia could respond, Dorian was there, pulling Michael away from her desk. "That's enough," Dorian said. "You're upset about the vote, I understand. But if you ever speak to her like that again—" "You'll what?" Michael challenged. "Fire your own brother?" "If necessary, yes." The brothers stared at each other, the family resemblance never more apparent than in their matching expressions of stubborn determination. Finally, Michael stepped back. "This isn't over, Dorian. Not by a long shot." He glanced at Talia. "And you should be careful who you trust." After he left, the office was silent. Employees who had witnessed the confrontation quickly returned to their work, avoiding eye contact. Dorian turned to Talia. "I'm sorry about that." "It's not your fault," she replied. "It is," he insisted. "Michael is lashing out at you to get to me, because he knows." He stopped himself. "Knows what?" Talia asked. Dorian's expression closed. "Nothing. It doesn't matter." He retreated to his office, closing the door firmly behind him. By the end of the day, the story of the King brothers' confrontation had spread throughout the building. When Talia went to the break room for coffee, conversation stopped as she entered. She could feel the weight of stares, the whispers that started as soon as she left. Back at her desk, she found an email from HR requesting a meeting the next morning. No explanation was given. When Dorian emerged from his office that evening, Talia showed him the email. "Do you know what this is about?" she asked. His expression darkened. "I can guess Michael has friends in HR. You think he's filed some kind of complaint against me? Not against you, against us." The implication was clear. Michael was suggesting there was an inappropriate relationship between them. "But there isn't," Talia began. "Isn't there?" Dorian asked quietly. Their eyes met, and the unspoken tension that had been building for weeks hung in the air between them. "I'll handle HR," Dorian said finally. "Don't worry about the meeting." But Talia did worry. She'd worked too hard to have her reputation damaged by office gossip, and whatever was happening between her and Dorian, whatever this pull was that she felt toward him, it wasn't worth losing everything she'd built. The next morning, Talia arrived early for the HR meeting. To her surprise, Patricia, the HR manager who had warned her not to unpack on her first day, was waiting with a sympathetic expression. "I'm sorry about this, Talia," Patricia said, "but we've received a complaint about your relationship with Mr. King." "There is no relationship," Talia replied firmly. "I'm his assistant, that's all." Patricia looked skeptical. "Several employees have reported special treatment, private dinners, expensive gifts." "That's not true," Talia protested. "We work late sometimes, so we eat in the office, and Mr. King gave me a pen with my initials because my old one was leaking ink." "And the bracelet?" Talia's hand went instinctively to her wrist, where the silver bracelet rested. "It was a thank you for my work on the board presentation." Patricia sighed. "Look, Talia, I like you. I think you're good at your job, but the company has policies about relationships between managers and their direct reports." "There is no relationship," Talia repeated, feeling her anger rise. "This is Michael King trying to cause problems for his brother." Before Patricia could respond, the door opened and Dorian walked in. His expression was calm, but Talia could see the tension in his shoulders. "This meeting is over," he said. Patricia stood. "Mr. King, I need to follow protocol." "The protocol for baseless accusations made by a disgruntled executive who just lost a major vote," Dorian interrupted. "I don't think there is one. Your brother has significant influence." "And I'm the CEO," Dorian reminded her. "Ms. Monroe has done nothing wrong. If anyone has concerns about her performance or her conduct, they can bring them to me directly." His tone left no room for argument. Patricia nodded reluctantly. "Of course, Mr. King. But I should warn you. There's talk." "There's always talk," Dorian dismissed. "I don't care about talk. I care about results. And Ms. Monroe delivers results." As they left the HR office, Talia felt a mix of gratitude and concern. Dorian had defended her, but in doing so, had he just added fuel to the rumors? They rode the elevator in silence. When they reached their floor, Dorian spoke without looking at her. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that." "It's not your fault," Talia replied. "It is," he insisted. "My brother is using you to get to me, and I let him." Talia touched his arm, stopping him before he could walk away. "Why does he hate you so much?" Dorian was quiet for a long moment. "Because our father loved me more, or hated me less. With my father, It was hard to tell the difference. It was the most personal thing he had ever shared with her. Throughout the day, Talia was aware of the glances and whispers that followed her. By afternoon, she'd had enough. She marched into Dorian's office, closing the door behind her. "I think I should request a transfer," she said. Dorian looked up, his expression unreadable. "Why?" "You know why. The rumors. The meeting with HR. It's affecting my ability to do my job. And if I don't want you to transfer?" Talia took a deep breath. "Then I'll have to resign." For a long moment, Dorian said nothing. Then he stood, walking to the window that overlooked the city. "My father built this company with fists, not hands," he said, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "I'm just trying not to break it, or myself." Talia was struck by the vulnerability in his voice, the weight of expectation that seemed to press down on him. "So stop swinging," she said softly. "Start holding." He turned to look at her, and something shifted in his eyes, a softening, a recognition. "I don't want you to transfer," he said finally, "but I don't want these rumors to hurt you either. What do you suggest?" Dorian considered this. "A compromise. You continue as my assistant, but we're more careful. No late nights alone in the office, no gifts that could be misinterpreted." "And dinner?" Talia asked, remembering his invitation. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Maybe someday, when the timing is right." It wasn't a solution, not really, but it was a step, an acknowledgement that whatever was happening between them mattered enough to protect. The next few weeks brought a fragile peace. Michael seemed to have retreated, focusing his attention on the European division and making himself scarce around the executive floor. The rumors about Talia and Dorian faded as newer office gossip took precedence, but the careful distance they maintained took its toll. Talia missed the late-night strategy sessions, the unguarded moments when Dorian would let his mask slip, and she could tell he missed them too, from the way his eyes followed her when she left at 5 o'clock each day. One morning, Walter Marrow appeared at Talia's desk, his eyes twinkling with their usual good humor. "How are you holding up, my dear?" he asked. "I'm fine, Mr. Marrow," Talia replied with a smile. "Just busy." Walter nodded, glancing toward Dorian's closed office door. "And how are things between you two?" "Professional," Talia said firmly. "As they should be." Walter chuckled. "You know, I've known Dorian since he was a boy. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Talia felt her cheeks grow warm. "Mr. Marrow, I know. It's none of my business," Walter conceded. "But I care about that boy. He's had so little happiness in his life." Before Talia could respond, Dorian's door opened. He looked surprised to see Walter standing at Talia's desk. "Walter, I didn't know we had a meeting scheduled." "We don't," Walter replied. "I was just checking in on this remarkable young woman, making sure you're not working her too hard." Dorian's eyes met Talia's briefly. "Ms. Monroe is more than capable of handling anything I ask of her." "Oh, I have no doubt of that," Walter agreed. "She might be the only person in this building who can handle you, Dorian." After Walter left, Dorian lingered at Talia's desk. "What did he want?" he asked. "Just being friendly," Talia replied, not mentioning Walter's comments about Dorian's feelings for her. Dorian nodded, not quite believing her, but not pushing further. "I have a meeting with the Tokyo office tonight. It will run late." "I'll set it up in the conference room," Talia said, "and I'll leave the notes on your desk for tomorrow." "Actually," Dorian hesitated, "I'd like you to join the call. They'll be discussing the expansion plans for the Asian division. You were instrumental in saving it. You should be part of planning its future." It was an olive branch, a professional reason for them to work together after hours, to return to the ease they'd had before the rumors started. "Of course," Talia agreed. "What time?" 8 o'clock. I'll order dinner." That evening, they sat side by side in the conference room, working through the details of the Asian expansion. The Tokyo team was impressed by Talia's knowledge of their markets, her thoughtful questions about their growth strategy. When the call ended just after midnight, Dorian looked at Talia with undisguised admiration. "You continue to surprise me," he said. "Is that a good thing?" "It's a rare thing," he replied. "Most people are predictable, boring," Talia smiled. "And you hate being bored. More than anything." For a moment they just looked at each other, the late hour and empty office creating an intimacy that felt dangerous and inevitable. Dorian was the first to break the spell. "It's late. I'll call you a car." As they waited in the lobby for the car to arrive, standing closer than strictly necessary, Talia realized how much she had missed this, being alone with him, seeing the person behind the CEO's mask. "Thank you for including me in the call," she said. "You earned it," Dorian replied. "The Tokyo team was impressed. They asked if you might visit the office there." Talia looked up, surprised. Me? Why? Because you understand their vision, and because I told them you're the future of this company. The simple statement took her breath away, not just the recognition of her abilities, but the implication that Dorian saw her as more than just his assistant, that he saw a path forward for her at Marrow and King. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say you'll think about it, Dorian suggested. A week in Tokyo. It would be a good opportunity. Before Talia could respond, the car pulled up to the curb. Dorian opened the door for her, his hand briefly touching hers as she stepped past him. Good night, Talia, he said softly. Good night, Dorian, she replied, using his first name for the first time. The smile that spread across his face was worth any risk. The next morning, Talia arrived to find the office unusually quiet. Employees stood in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. As she walked to her desk, she noticed several people glance her way, then quickly look away. Patricia from HR was waiting at her desk, her expression grim. What's going on? Talia asked. Patricia handed her a tablet. On the screen was a gossip blog with the headline, King's New Queen, CEO's assistant gets fast-track promotion after late-night meetings. Below was a grainy photo of Talia and Dorian standing close together in the lobby the night before. The article suggested that Talia was being given special treatment in exchange for personal services to the CEO. This is ridiculous, Talia said, her voice shaking with anger. Nothing happened. I know, Patricia sighed, but it's all over the internet, and Michael King is calling for an emergency board meeting to discuss improper relationships within the executive team. Talia felt sick. This wasn't just office gossip anymore. This was a deliberate attempt to destroy her reputation, and possibly Dorian's as well. Where is Mr. King? She asked. In a meeting with legal, Patricia replied. They're discussing options. Talia nodded, trying to maintain her composure despite the stares of her colleagues. She sat at her desk and began her work, refusing to hide or show weakness. An hour later, Dorian emerged from the conference room. His face was a mask of cold fury as he strode to Talia's desk. My office, he said quietly. Once inside, with the door closed, his expression softened. I'm sorry about this. It's not your fault, Talia replied automatically. It is, he insisted. Michael is behind it. He hired a photographer to follow us. He's trying to force me out, and he's using you to do it. Talia shook her head. Why would the board care about this? Even if we were in a relationship, which we're not, it's hardly grounds for dismissal. It's not about us, Dorian explained. It's about creating doubt, making the board question my judgment, my stability, and Michael has always been good at manipulating perceptions. So, what do we do? Dorian's jaw tightened. If we fight back, the board meeting is tomorrow, I want you there. Is that wise? Won't it just confirm the rumors? I don't care about the rumors, Dorian said firmly. I care about the truth, and the truth is, you're the most valuable person in this company. The intensity in his voice made Talia's heart race. Dorian, I know the timing is terrible, he continued. I know we agreed to be careful, but I'm tired of pretending I don't... He stopped, struggling to find the words. Don't what? Talia pressed. Care about you, he finished. More than I should. More than is wise. It was the closest thing to a declaration he had ever made. Talia felt her carefully constructed professional walls beginning to crumble. I care about you too, she admitted, but this job matters to me. My reputation matters. I know, Dorian nodded. That's why we need to face this head-on, together. The next morning, Talia dressed with particular care, a sharp black suit that projected confidence and professionalism. When she arrived at the office, Dorian was waiting. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. The boardroom was tense when they entered. Michael sat at one end of the table, a smug smile on his face. The other board members looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. Walter Marrow, looking older and more tired than Talia had ever seen him, called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss some concerning allegations, Walter began. Michael has brought to our attention a potential conflict of interest within the executive team. Michael stood, his expression a mask of false concern. This isn't easy for me, he said, but as a board member I have a duty to protect this company. My brother's relationship with his assistant raises serious ethical questions. What relationship? Dorian interrupted. Ms. Monroe is a valued employee who has consistently gone above and beyond for this company. Come on, Dorian, Michael scoffed. The late nights? The special treatment? The gifts? It's obvious what's happening here. Talia felt her cheeks burn with anger and embarrassment, as the board members glanced between her and Dorian. "Ms. Monroe," one of the older board members addressed her directly. "These are serious allegations. Do you have anything to say?" Talia stood, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Mr. King is my boss. He is demanding, exacting, and relentless in his pursuit of excellence. He expects more from me than any boss I've ever had, and I deliver. That's not special treatment. That's a professional relationship based on mutual respect and hard work." The room was silent for a moment. Then Walter spoke. "And what about these photos, the late-night meetings?" "We were on a call with the Tokyo office," Dorian explained. "Ms. Monroe was included because of her work on saving the Asian division, work that, I might add, protected hundreds of jobs and millions in revenue." "Convenient," Michael muttered. "Enough," Walter said firmly. "This is getting us nowhere." He turned to Dorian. "I believe you. I've known you too long to think you'd risk this company for personal reasons." Michael stood, his face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. He's manipulating all of you, just like he always does." "The only manipulation I see," Walter replied calmly, "is coming from you, Michael." The older man turned to the rest of the board. "Unless anyone has actual evidence of professional misconduct, not gossip, not innuendo, but evidence, I move that we dismiss these allegations and get back to running our company." One by one, the board members nodded their agreement. Michael looked around the table in disbelief. "You're all blind," he said bitterly. "He's going to run this company into the ground, and you're letting him do it. The only one trying to damage this company is you," Dorian said quietly. "Leaking photos to gossip blogs, calling emergency board meetings over nothing. This stops now, Michael." "Or what?" Michael challenged. "Or the next board meeting will be to discuss your removal, not just from the board, but from the company entirely." The brothers stared at each other, decades of rivalry and resentment condensed into a single moment of tension. Finally, Michael looked away. "This isn't over," he said, gathering his papers. "Not by a long shot." As he stormed out of the boardroom, the remaining board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Well," Walter said with forced cheerfulness, "I think that concludes our business for today." As the board members filed out, several stopped to offer awkward apologies to Talia. She accepted them graciously, maintaining her professional composure despite her churning emotions. When everyone had left except Walter, Dorian, and Talia, the old man sighed heavily. "That boy never could accept when he was beaten," Walter said, shaking his head, "just like his father." Dorian's expression darkened at the mention of his father. "Michael won't stop. This was just the first attempt. Then we'll be ready for the next one," Walter replied. He turned to Talia with a kind smile. "You handled yourself beautifully, my dear. This company is lucky to have you." After Walter left, Dorian and Talia remained in the boardroom. The tension of the meeting had left them both drained. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," Dorian said quietly. "It's not your fault," Talia replied, the phrase having become a refrain between them. "It is," he insisted, "but I'm going to make it right." Dorian walked to the window, his back to Talia, as he looked out at the city. The afternoon sun cast his silhouette against the glass, highlighting the tension in his shoulders. "When my father died," he said, his voice low, "everyone expected me to run this company exactly as he had, with fear, with coldness. And for a long time I did. I thought that was strength." He turned to face her. "Until you arrived. Until you showed me that real strength isn't about making people fear you. It's about earning their respect." Talia felt her heart tighten at the vulnerability in his eyes. "I don't want to hide anymore, Talia," Dorian continued. "I don't want to pretend I don't care about you, just to avoid gossip." He crossed the room until he was standing in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "But I don't want to risk your reputation either," he added. "So I'll understand if you still want that transfer." Talia looked up at him, at the man who had begun as the cold, demanding boss she'd been warned about, and who had become so much more. "I don't want a transfer," she said softly. "I want—" Before she could finish, the boardroom door opened. It was Patricia from HR, looking apologetic for the interruption. "I'm sorry, Mr. King, but there's a situation downstairs. Michael is making a scene in the lobby. He's talking to reporters." Dorian's expression hardened. "Excuse me," he said to Talia. "I need to deal with this." As he strode from the room, Talia was left with the weight of unspoken words and the growing certainty that whatever was happening between them had moved far beyond a professional relationship. And despite all the complications, all the risks, she wasn't sure she wanted to stop it. By the time Talia reached the lobby, a small crowd had gathered. Michael stood near the entrance, surrounded by reporters with cameras and microphones. Dorian faced him, his expression carefully controlled despite the fury in his eyes. "My brother has compromised his position as CEO," Michael was saying, his voice carrying across the marble floor. "His relationship with his assistant raises serious questions about his judgment." "There is no relationship," Dorian replied coldly. "These accusations are nothing but a desperate attempt by my brother to undermine my leadership after he failed to convince the board to sell our Asian division." One of the reporters noticed Talia and pointed her out. Suddenly, all eyes and cameras turned in her direction. She froze, feeling exposed and vulnerable under their scrutiny. Dorian moved quickly to her side, positioning himself slightly in front of her, as if to shield her from the cameras. "Ms. Monroe is one of the most valuable employees at Marrow & King," he said firmly. "The only reason she's being targeted is because she helped save this company from a disastrous sale that would have benefited my brother financially." "Is that true?" a reporter called out to Michael. "Did you stand to gain personally from the sale?" Michael's confident expression faltered. "That's not... I was acting in the company's best interests." "Was Vivian Reed planning to offer you a position after the acquisition?" another reporter pressed. The question seemed to catch Michael off guard. "I don't know what you're talking about. We have sources that say you were promised a senior executive role at Reed Enterprises if the sale went through," the reporter continued. "Is that true, Mr. King?" Talia glanced at Dorian, who looked as surprised as she was by this line of questioning. Someone had tipped off the press about Michael's arrangement with Vivian Reed, but it hadn't been them. As Michael struggled to respond, security guards began ushering the reporters toward the exit. The lobby gradually cleared. Leaving Michael standing alone, his planned media ambush turned against him. Dorian approached his brother, keeping his voice low. "You're done here, Michael. Clean out your office and leave." "You can't fire me," Michael sneered. "I'm a king. This company has my name on the building." "The board will vote on your removal tomorrow morning," Dorian replied. "After your performance today, I don't think you'll find much support." Michael's face flushed with anger. "This isn't over, Dorian." "Yes, it is," a voice said from behind them. They turned to see Walter Marrow walking slowly toward them, leaning on a cane. Despite his frail appearance, his voice was strong and clear. "I've spoken to the other board members," Walter continued. "We've agreed to hold an emergency vote this afternoon." He looked at Michael with disappointment in his eyes. "You've left us no choice, son." For the first time, Michael looked uncertain. "Walter, you can't seriously believe—" "I believe you've forgotten what this company stands for," Walter interrupted. "Your father and I built Marrow & King to create something lasting, something meaningful, not to satisfy personal vendettas or make backroom deals with competitors." Michael glanced around, realizing he was outnumbered. "Fine," he said bitterly. "Have your vote. But remember, I still own 15% of this company. You haven't seen the last of me." As he stormed off toward the elevators, Walter sighed heavily. "I had such hopes for him when he was younger." Dorian placed a hand on the older man's shoulder. "Thank you, Walter." "Don't thank me yet," Walter replied. "We still have damage control to do." He glanced at Talia. "Starting with making sure Ms. Monroe's reputation remains intact." Back in Dorian's office, Talia, Dorian, and Walter discussed their options. The PR team had been called in to draft a statement addressing the false allegations. Legal was reviewing potential actions against the gossip blog that had published the photos. "What I don't understand," Talia said, "is who told the reporters about Michael's deal with Vivian Reed." Walter's eyes twinkled. "Ah, well, I might have had something to do with that." Dorian looked surprised. "You?" "I've been in this business a long time," Walter said with a small smile. "I've made friends with quite a few journalists over the years. When I heard what Michael was planning, I made some calls." "You knew he was going to ambush me with reporters?" Dorian asked. Walter nodded. "His secretary is loyal to the company first. She warned me this morning." "You're a sly old fox, Walter," Dorian said with admiration. "Learned from the best." Walter winked. "Your father was a difficult man, but he knew how to outmaneuver his enemies." As the day progressed, the situation began to stabilize. The board voted unanimously to remove Michael from his position. The PR statement was released, firmly denying any improper relationship and emphasizing Talia's professional contributions to the company. By evening, most of the employees had gone home. Talia remained at her desk, finishing the last of the correspondence related to the day's events. She was exhausted, but relieved that the worst seemed to be over. Dorian emerged from his office looking as tired as she felt. "You should go home," he said. "It's been a long day." "I'm almost finished," she replied. Just a few more emails. He nodded, hesitating at her desk. Thank you, he said finally, for standing by me through all of this. Of course, Talia said. It's my job. Is that all it is? Dorian asked quietly. A job? The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Before Talia could respond, Dorian's phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned. It's Walter, he said. I should take this. As he returned to his office, Talia felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. They had been dancing around their feelings for weeks, always interrupted at crucial moments. Maybe it was for the best, a sign that they should keep their relationship professional, despite the pull they felt toward each other. She finished her emails and gathered her things to leave. As she was putting on her coat, Dorian's office door opened. Talia, he called, his voice urgent. It's Walter. He's had a heart attack. They've taken him to St. Mary's Hospital. The next few hours were a blur. They rushed to the hospital, finding Walter in the ICU, his normally robust presence diminished by the medical equipment surrounding him. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but at his age, any heart attack was serious. Dorian sat beside Walter's bed, holding the old man's hand with a gentleness Talia had never seen from him before. She stood in the doorway, not wanting to intrude on the moment. He's been more of a father to me than my own, Dorian said without looking up. After my father died, it was Walter who guided me, who believed in me. Talia moved to stand beside him. He's strong. He'll pull through. Dorian nodded, though the worry remained in his eyes. He told me once that I needed to stop living in my father's shadow, that I needed to find my own way to lead. He looked up at Talia. I didn't understand what he meant until you came along. Me? Talia asked, surprised. You challenged me, Dorian explained. You showed me there was another way to earn respect besides fear, a better way. The honesty in his voice touched something deep inside Talia. She placed her hand on his shoulder, a silent support in a moment of vulnerability. They stayed at the hospital until the doctors assured them Walter was stable. By then it was nearly midnight. As they walked to the parking garage, Dorian insisted on driving Talia home himself. It's late, he said, and after everything that's happened today, I'd feel better knowing you got home safely. The city was quiet as they drove, the streets empty except for the occasional late-night taxi. When they arrived at Talia's apartment building, Dorian parked, but made no move to say goodbye. Oh, would you like to come up? Talia asked, surprising herself with the invitation. I could make some tea. Dorian hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. Talia's apartment was small but warm, filled with books and simple, elegant furniture. She moved to the kitchen to put on the kettle while Dorian looked around, taking in the details of her personal space. You have a lot of books, he observed, examining her bookshelves. I love to read, Talia replied. It's my escape. What do you need to escape from? The question was asked lightly, but Talia sensed the deeper meaning behind it. Not what, she said. Who? Dorian turned to face her. And who are you escaping from, Talia? People who want to put me in a box, she replied honestly. People who think they know what I can and can't do because of how I look or where I come from. Dorian nodded slowly. I understand that better than you might think. Because of your father? Because of my name, he corrected. Everyone expects a king to be exactly like the kings who came before. Cold, ruthless, unfeeling. But you're not, Talia said softly. Not really. Dorian moved closer to her. I was. Until you. The kettle whistled, breaking the moment. Talia busied herself with making the tea, trying to calm her racing heart. When she turned around, Dorian was standing by her window, looking out at the city lights. I should have handled things differently, he said. With Michael, with the rumors. You did what you thought was right, Talia replied, bringing him a cup of tea. I put you in an impossible position, Dorian disagreed. I risked your reputation, your career. I'm tougher than I look, Talia said with a small smile. It takes more than office gossip to break me. Dorian looked at her with admiration. Yes, you are. It's one of the things I love. He stopped himself, taking a sip of tea instead of finishing the sentence, but Talia had heard enough. One of the things you what, Dorian? He set down his cup, his eyes meeting hers, with an intensity that took her breath away. One of the things I love about you, he finished. There are many. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Talia felt her carefully constructed professional walls crumble completely. This is complicated, she said quietly. Life is complicated, Dorian replied. That doesn't mean we should hide from it. He moved closer until they were standing just inches apart. I've spent my entire life hiding behind a mask, he continued. being what everyone expected me to be. Cold, distant, untouchable. But with you, I don't want to hide anymore. Talia looked up at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes, the openness that no one else at Marrow & King ever saw. I don't want you to hide either, she admitted. Slowly giving her every chance to pull away, Dorian leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When Talia responded, her hands moving to his shoulders, the kiss deepened, becoming something more, a promise, a beginning. When they finally broke apart, Dorian rested his forehead against hers. We should talk about what this means, he said. For us, for your position at the company. Talia nodded, though she was reluctant to break the moment with practical concerns. Tomorrow, she suggested, we can figure it out tomorrow. That night, they talked for hours about their childhoods, their dreams, the paths that had led them to each other. Dorian told her about growing up with a father who saw emotions as weakness, who measured love in achievements rather than affection. Talia shared her struggles as a black woman in a corporate world that wasn't designed for her success, the constant pressure to be twice as good for half the recognition. As dawn broke over the city, they had fallen asleep on Talia's couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. They woke to the sound of Dorian's phone ringing. It was the hospital. Walter was awake and asking for him. They dressed quickly and rushed to St. Mary's. Walter looked pale but alert, his eyes brightening when he saw them enter the room together. Ah, he said with a knowing smile, I see you two have finally sorted things out. Dorian looked embarrassed, but Talia just laughed. Nothing gets past you, does it, Mr. Marrow? Not much, Walter agreed, and it's about time. I was getting tired of watching you two dance around each other. The doctors arrived to check Walter's vitals, and Dorian stepped into the hallway to speak with them. Talia stayed behind, sitting in the chair beside Walter's bed. He's different with you, Walter said once they were alone. Lighter, more like the boy he was before his father molded him into that cold CEO everyone fears. He's still learning who he wants to be, Talia replied. Walter nodded. Aren't we all? He reached out to pat her hand. You're good for him, Talia, but this won't be easy, you know. The company, the board, there will be talk. There's already talk, Talia pointed out. At least now it will be based on something real. When Dorian returned, his expression was relieved. The doctors say you're going to be fine, he told Walter, but you need rest, and to stop working so hard. Walter scoffed. Says the man who practically lives in his office. That might be changing, Dorian replied, glancing at Talia with a small smile. The older man looked between them, his eyes twinkling. Good. Now, while I have you both here, there's something I want to discuss. Dorian raised an eyebrow. Walter, you just had a heart attack. Whatever it is can wait. Nonsense, Walter dismissed. This is important. He shifted his gaze to Talia. How would you feel about a promotion, my dear? Talia looked surprised. A promotion? To Director of Special Projects, Walter continued, working directly with the board on new initiatives, starting with our Asian expansion. Dorian frowned. Walter, we haven't discussed this. No, we haven't, Walter agreed. But we should have. Talia has proven herself 10 times over, and this way she wouldn't be reporting directly to you. No conflict of interest. Talia was speechless. It was a tremendous opportunity, one that recognized her abilities beyond being Dorian's assistant. Of course, I'd understand if you wanted to think it over, Walter added. It's a big step. I don't need to think it over, Talia replied. I accept. Dorian looked at her, his expression a mix of pride and something more tender. Are you sure? It will mean more responsibility, more pressure. I can handle pressure, Talia reminded him. And it's time for me to move beyond your desk, don't you think? The double meaning wasn't lost on either of them. Their relationship could never truly flourish if she remained his assistant. This promotion offered a path forward for both their professional and personal connections. Walter smiled, satisfied. Excellent. I'll have HR draft the paperwork as soon as I'm out of this hospital bed. The next few weeks brought significant changes to Marrow & King. Michael resigned from the board entirely, selling his shares back to the company in a deal negotiated by Walter. Vivian Reed's company announced it was focusing on European markets, effectively ending their bid for the Asian division. Talia's promotion was met with mixed reactions. Some employees were genuinely happy for her, recognizing her talents and contributions. Others whispered that she had slept her way into power. But as the weeks passed and she began implementing successful initiatives in her new role, even the skeptics had to acknowledge her capabilities. Dorian and Talia kept their relationship private at first, not hiding it, but not flaunting it either. They established clear boundaries at work, maintaining professional distance during office hours. But everyone noticed the change in Dorian, the way his cold exterior had softened, the way he listened more and demanded less. 3 months after Talia's promotion, Dorian called a staff meeting. The entire executive floor gathered in the main conference room, curious about the unusual summons. Dorian stood at the head of the table, looking more relaxed than anyone had ever seen him. "I've called you all here to announce some changes," he began. "Changes in how we operate as a company and in how I intend to lead going forward." The room was silent, all eyes on the CEO who had once been feared for his cold demeanor and quick temper. "For too long, this company has operated on fear," Dorian continued. "People afraid to make mistakes, afraid to speak up, afraid to take risks. That ends today." He outlined a new approach, one that emphasized collaboration over competition, growth over intimidation. As he spoke, his gaze occasionally found Talia, who stood at the back of the room watching with pride. "You think she stayed because I wanted her?" Dorian said, echoing the words he'd once spoken to Michael. "The truth is, I stayed sane because she wanted to." A murmur ran through the gathered employees. "You all feared me," Dorian acknowledged. "She didn't, and because of that, I became a man worth not fearing." It was a public declaration, not just of his feelings for Talia, but of how she had changed him, changed the company. After the meeting, as employees filed out with a new energy in their steps, Talia approached Dorian. "That was quite a speech," she said. "I meant every word," he replied. Walter, who had been sitting in the corner of the room, chuckled as he stood to leave. "I'll give you two a moment," he said with a wink. When they were alone, Dorian took Talia's hand. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a silver key on a delicate chain. "What's this?" Talia asked. "Not to the office," Dorian said softly. "To something I never thought I'd give again. My peace, my home." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "My heart, if you'll take it." Talia looked at the key, then back at Dorian, at the man who had once been the cold, demanding boss she'd been warned about, and who had become the person she loved. "I'll take it," she said, "on one condition." "Name it," Dorian replied. "That you'll take mine too." He smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face. "Deal." As they sealed the promise with a kiss, neither of them noticed Walter watching from the doorway, a satisfied smile on his face. The man who had fired 12 assistants in a year had finally met his match in the woman who refused to leave, and in finding each other, they had both found something they hadn't known they were looking for, the courage to be themselves, without fear or apology. Talia had come to Marrow & King expecting to last a month at most. Instead, she had changed the company and its CEO forever, not by bending to his will, but by standing her ground. Not by fearing his power, but by showing him a different kind of strength, the kind that comes not from controlling others, but from knowing yourself, the kind that turns a job into a passion, a boss into a partner, and two separate lives into one shared journey, the kind that takes an ending and turns it into a beginning. 6 months later, Talia stood in Dorian's office, now their office, as they often worked together on special projects. The Asian division was thriving under their joint leadership, with Talia scheduled to visit the Tokyo office the following week. "Ready to go?" Dorian asked, finishing a final email before shutting down his computer. "Almost," Talia replied, arranging some files for the next day. Dorian walked to her desk, not the assistant's desk outside his office, but a new one they had installed inside, equal in size and position to his own. On it sat a small silver nameplate, Talia Monroe, Director of Special Projects. Beside it was a framed photo of them with Walter at the company's annual gala, all three smiling widely. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" Dorian asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Talia leaned back against him. "Yes, but I don't mind hearing it again." As they left the office together, hands intertwined, they passed Dorian's old assistant's desk, now occupied by a young man who had been given strict instructions that fearing the boss was not part of the job description. The desk where Talia had once sat, refusing to be intimidated, refusing to leave when everyone expected her to fail. The last desk she would ever have to settle for. The desk that had been just the beginning.